Let's dive into some pretty fascinating stuff today, huh? We're talking courage, and we're using Mel Robbins' book, The 5-Second Rule, as our guide. You guys gave us some awesome excerpts to work with.
It's a book that can, really shift your perspective. Not about becoming some sort of, superhero, but more about finding that strength that's already within you.
Yeah, totally. So we're going to be breaking down Robbins' main points, seeing how this whole 5-second rule thing actually works. Hopefully by the end, you'll walk away with some solid takeaways and maybe even a new thought to chew on.
That's the goal. One thing that really jumps out is how Robbins kind of redefines what we think of as courage.
Right. It's not just those big heroic moments, right?
Yeah, it's more about the everyday stuff.
Okay.
Those times when we push past hesitation or fear or whatever's holding us back.
It's like Robbins actually says that courage is like a birthright, not some special skill.
Yeah, exactly. And she uses this cool analogy to explain it. Imagine fish swimming in water.
Okay.
They don't even realize they're in water, right?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
their whole world.
Makes sense.
So she asks, are WE swimming in courage water without even knowing it? What are we missing out on because we don't see that potential in ourselves?
That's a really good question.
It is. And, Robin, her own story is a perfect example. She talks about this time in her life where she felt totally stuck.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Right? Feeling overwhelmed by work, by family, wanting things to change, but not knowing where to even start.
So how did she get from feeling trapped to creating this whole 5-second rule idea? What was that journey like?
Well, get this. It all started with a rocket launch.
Wait, what?
Yeah. She was watching a commercial, with that classic countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it just sparked something in her.
Whoa, I love that. So she's thinking, if it works for rockets, maybe it can work for me, right?
Exactly. And it shows how inspiration can come from the most random places. Robbins even points out that matches, Velcro, even the Frappuccino were all accidental discoveries.
I never thought of it that way. So maybe those little ideas we have, even if they seem kind of silly, might lead to something amazing.
Totally. But I think we should dive into the science behind this whole thing. How does the 5-second rule actually work on a neurological level?
Yeah, let's get into that.
Okay, so think of it like hitting the reset button on all those anxious thoughts. You know how your brain can kind of get stuck in this loop?
Right.
Overthinking everything, talking yourself out of doing something.
Yeah, all the time.
Well, the 5-second rule, it's it interrupts that pattern.
So it's like we're stopping the worry before it takes over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Neurologically speaking, it shifts our focus to the prefrontal cortex, which is that part of our brain that's ready for action, instead of getting bogged down by fear or doubt.
So it's not just some motivational trick. There's real science behind it.
Exactly. And Robbins actually used it herself to break her snooze button habit.
Oh, that's a good one.
She also talks about how it helped her son cope with anxiety. So it's not just for big life changes.
Right. But besides, hitting the snooze button, how else can we actually use this rule in our daily lives?
Well, Robbins gets into all sorts of applications, like overcoming procrastination. You know that feeling, putting things off.
Oh, I know it well.
But she actually breaks it down into 2 different types, which is interesting. Destructive and productive.
That's okay. Hold on. Productive procrastination. What's that about?
We'll get to that. But the 5-second rule is really designed to tackle the destructive kind. Those tasks we avoid, even though we know they need to get done.
Right. It's like that extra push we need to overcome, like the inertia or whatever.
Totally. It's like that initial, I don't want to do this. But then you use the rule and you're like, okay, let's go.
Makes sense. She also talks a lot about building confidence, which is something I think a lot of us struggle with.
Right. And Robbins' point is that confidence isn't something we're born with. It's something we build through action. And she tells this amazing story about an engineer at Cisco who, after reading her book, used the 5-second rule to introduce himself to the CEO.
Wait, seriously? He just walked up and introduced himself, just like that?
Yeah. And guess what? It led to a job opportunity. It shows how even a small step outside our comfort zone can have a huge impact on our confidence.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful example.
It is. It kind of goes back to that idea of those little 5-second rule moments adding up over time. Each time we use it, we're kind of proving to ourselves that we can take action, even when it feels scary.
I like that. So it's not just about the big scary things, but those smaller moments too. But I'm curious, what about those times when we do have to face those bigger, scarier things, like in our relationships or when we're chasing our dreams? Does the 5-second rule apply there too?
Oh, absolutely. Remember Todd's story?
Refresh my memory.
He's the one who wanted to switch his major to physical education, even though his parents weren't exactly thrilled about it.
Oh, yeah, I remember now.
Can you imagine how tough that must have been to like go against what your parents want? But he used the 5-second rule, and it helped him break free from that pressure and pursue what HE was passionate about.
It's like the rule gave him that extra push to choose his own WN path, you know?
Totally. And Robbins doesn't shy away from the tougher stuff either. She talks about how the 5-second rule helped her have a really difficult but important conversation with her father after he was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm.
Wow, that's powerful.
Right. It shows that it's not just about achieving goals or whatever. It's about connecting with people, facing those challenging situations with more courage.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like Robbins's message is ultimately about taking action, right? Ditching that wait for the right time mentality and realizing that we have the power to change our own lives.
Exactly. But I think we all struggle with that, right? Like, how do we actually bridge that gap between wanting to make a change and actually doing it?
It's that whole easier said than done thing, right?
Totally. And that's where this idea of the future you comes in. Robbins talks about visualizing the future state we desire, like really picturing it as a way to motivate ourselves to act now.
So like picturing the person we want to become and letting that image guide us.
Exactly. And she uses this cool analogy about life being a numbers game. Like, remember that game, Angry Birds? It took them 51 tries before they hit it big.
That's a good point. So it's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to keep trying, even when we mess up.
Exactly. But, sometimes what holds us back, even more than messing up, are our own thoughts and feelings.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sometimes my own brain is my worst enemy.
And Robbins talks about this too. One of the most important things she emphasizes is that feelings are not facts.
Wait, hold on. Aren't our feelings our feelings? What does that even mean?
Well, of course, our feelings are real, but she's saying we often let them dictate our actions, even when those feelings aren't actually based on reality.
Okay, I think I see what you mean.
Like, let's say you're thinking, I feel like I can't do this, or I feel like I'm not good enough. Those feelings might be totally real, but it doesn't mean they're true.
So it's like recognizing that our feelings aren't always the best guide for making decisions.
Exactly. Robbins talks about how, like, professional athletes, right? They train themselves to separate their emotions from their performance.
Oh, okay.
Like, they might feel exhausted, in those last few minutes of the game.
Right.
But they don't let that feeling stop them from doing what they need to do.
That's a good point. It's about pushing through, even when it's tough.
Yeah. And Robbins says we can all learn to do that, to not let our emotions control us. We can choose to act in a way that aligns with our goals, with what we truly value.
So it's about being intentional with our actions.
Exactly. And she even compares anxiety to excitement, saying they're actually very similar physiologically.
Really?
Yeah, she says it's our mindset that makes all the difference, like how we label it.
Oh, I see.
She even tells a story about how she helped her own son overcome his anxiety about sleepovers, just by reframing it as excitement.
Wow, that's a great example.
Right, just changing the label, totally shifted his experience.
It shows how powerful our thoughts can be, huh? But it also makes me think about that inner critic we all have.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that voice of self-doubt.
Oh, tell me about it.
It can be so hard to quiet that voice, even when you know it's not helping.
Robbins talks about that, too. She says our inner critic is like one of the biggest obstacles to growth.
No, I believe it.
It's always whispering things like, you're not good enough, or you'll fail, or why even bother?
I know that voice all too well.
The key, Robbins says, is to realize that we have a choice. We can either listen to that critic and let it control us, or we can choose to silence it and amplify the voice of, possibility.
So it's about choosing to focus on a more positive, more empowering internal dialogue.
Exactly. And Robbins is super open about her own struggles with self-doubt, especially early in her career.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that successful people have those doubts too, right?
Right. But she learned to reframe her thinking, to focus on her strength, to celebrate her accomplishments.
I love that. It's like a reminder that we all have something unique to offer, and that our value isn't determined by some inner critic or what other people think,
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our own worth.
Yeah, and it probably helps to surround yourself with people who support you, who believe in you.
For sure. And speaking of supportive people, it kind of makes me think back to that engineer at Cisco, the one who introduced himself to the CEO.
That was such a bold move.
And Robbins' point is that we can cultivate that kind of courage in any area of our lives. She talks about using the 5-second rule to overcome social anxiety, to connect with people, to pursue your passions, to take care of your health.
Ooh, okay, let's break some of those down. I'm especially curious about the whole taking care of our health thing
Yeah.
because, that's something I personally struggle with sometimes.
Well, Robbins emphasizes that self-care actually takes courage, especially when we're facing like illness or self-doubt or those voices in our head telling us we're not good enough.
Right.
It's about pushing past those limiting beliefs and making choices that, actually support our well-being.
So it's about those everyday things like making time for exercise, getting enough sleep,
Yeah, totally.
but also like having the courage to actually ask for help when you need it.
Exactly. And she tells this crazy story about Greg Cheek, who, after being diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, decided to run like 10 marathons.
Whoa. Talk about turning a challenge into an opportunity.
Right. And it's not just about these like grand gestures.
Right.
She also talks about Amy Roback, the host of Good Morning America. She agreed to have her first ever mammogram live on air.
Oh, wow. What a powerful way to like encourage others to prioritize their health.
Right. But in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and social media and all that, taking care of our mental health is super important too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That can be tough these days.
Robbins talks about that too. She shares how her own daughter decided to delete Instagram and VSCO from her phone to like minimize distractions and focus better.
That's a really brave choice, especially for a young person.
It is. And it shows how important it is to like set those boundaries with technology, to prioritize our mental well-being.
Yeah, it's like we have to consciously choose to disconnect sometimes.
Exactly. And Robin's point is that managing our digital lives, it's a form of self-care too, It takes courage to like disconnect, to say no to that constant stream of information, to create space for quiet, for reflection.
It makes you realize that everyday courage isn't always about like these big dramatic actions, right? It's also about those smaller, quieter choices we make every day to take care of ourselves.
Totally. And those choices, they often require us to like really listen to our gut, especially in our relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is to say what needs to be said, even if it feels scary or uncomfortable.
She has that really moving story about a conversation she had with her father after his brain aneurysm diagnosis.
Yeah.
She used the 5-second rule to push past her fear and ask him, "Are you scared?"
Such a powerful moment. And his response was so insightful. He said he wasn't scared, but actually grateful for the opportunity to like address the issue before it was too late. Right. And he talked about living without regrets, pursuing our passions, cherishing our relationships, all that.
It's a good reminder that, like, we never know how much time we have, So it's important to make the most of every moment, to have those tough conversations while we can.
Exactly. Robbins even encourages us to break the silence in our relationships, to say, "I love you," before it's too late.
Yeah, that one really hit me hard, especially having lost people close to me.
It's tough.
Yeah.
But she also talks about the courage it takes to forgive, to reconcile, or even to like walk away from relationships that aren't serving us anymore.
Oof. Yeah, that can be one of the hardest things to do.
It is, especially when there's history involved or you're afraid of hurting someone.
Right.
Robbins shares this story about Courtney, who used the 5-second rule to reach out to her estranged father.
Oh, wow.
And it just shows that forgiveness and reconciliation are possible, even when things have been really strained.
It gives me hope.
It does. But sometimes, the most courageous act is knowing when to let go.
Yeah, that's true too.
She tells the story of Carrie, who used the 5-second rule to leave a marriage that was no longer fulfilling.
It's like sometimes you have to choose yourself,
Exactly. It's about honoring your own truth and having the courage to create a life that aligns with what you need.
Powerful stuff. But before we move on, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. Procrastination.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole productive procrastination thing.
It's a cool concept. It's not about being lazy or irresponsible, right? It's more about recognizing that sometimes stepping away from a task can actually lead to breakthroughs.
So it's like giving your mind space to work things out in the background.
Totally. Robbins actually admits that she used productive procrastination while writing this very book. It allowed her to come back to the project with fresh eyes, with new insights.
That's interesting. So how do we know the difference between like the destructive procrastination and this productive kind?
Well, Robbins has this 2-step approach to tackling the destructive kind. The first step might surprise you. Forgive yourself.
Wait, seriously? Just forgive myself.
I know, it sounds simple, right?
Yeah.
But we often get so caught up in blaming ourselves, feeling ashamed when we procrastinate.
Yeah.
And that just makes it harder to actually get back on track.
So step one is like acknowledge it, but don't beat yourself up about it.
Exactly. Give yourself permission to move forward. And then step 2 is asking yourself, what would the future you do?
I love that. It's like tapping into your wisest self.
Right. Robbins says that picturing our future selves can actually motivate us to make choices that are in line with our long-term goals.
It's like getting advice from your future self.
Totally.
Yeah.
And of course, the 5-second rule itself is a great tool to fight procrastination because it forces you to take action before your mind can come up with all those excuses.
It's like outsmarting your own brain.
Exactly. Robbins tells this great story about 16-year-old Andre who used the rule to start writing a book. It shows that age is no barrier to achieving your dreams, and that even small, consistent actions can add up to big results.
That's inspiring. So we've got forgiveness, we've got envisioning our future selves, and we've got the 5-second rule as our secret weapon to fight procrastination. Anything else Robbins suggests to help us stay on track?
She talks a lot about mastering our mornings. Like, how we start our day really sets the tone for everything that follows.
Oh, I can definitely see that. When my morning is rushed and chaotic, it's hard to feel in control the rest of the day.
Exactly. And Robbins actually outlines her own morning routine, which includes waking up early, planning her day, focusing on her goals, all before getting caught up in the demands of work and family.
So it's about being intentional with your time and energy.
Exactly. And she encourages everyone to experiment, to find a morning routine that works for them. It might involve exercise, meditation, journaling, or just like enjoying a quiet cup of coffee.
It's about finding what works for you and making it a priority.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's another form of everyday courage, right? Making that choice to start your day in a way that sets you up for success.
That's a great point. It's not just about facing big challenges. It's about those smaller choices we make each day to take care of ourselves, to build those positive habits.
Exactly. And to create a life that feels more aligned with our values and goals.
As we've been talking about all these different sides of everyday courage, I keep thinking about one thing that seems to tie it all together.
What's that?
Purpose. Finding that sense of purpose. Mel Robbins talks about this a lot in the book.
Oh, absolutely. She makes a really strong case that connecting our actions to something bigger, some larger purpose, it can really boost our courage.
Right.
And it can give us that resilience to keep going even when things get tough.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But how do we even find that sense of purpose? It can feel kind of abstract,
Totally. Robbins suggests starting by paying attention to what excites you, what truly makes you feel alive.
So what, just follow those things that spark your interest, even if they seem kind of random or scary?
Exactly. She talks about her own journey, which definitely hasn't been a straight line.
Oh, I remember her mentioning that, yeah.
Law school, then radio, then becoming a best-selling author and speaker. It's been a winding road.
It shows that it's okay not to have everything figured out, right?
Totally. Embrace the uncertainty. Allow yourself to evolve.
I love that. She also talks about getting curious, trying new things, and seeing where they lead. Sometimes our purpose isn't something we discover all at once.
Right. It unfolds over time as we follow those little breadcrumbs of inspiration.
Oh, this reminds me of that story she tells about Joe, the banker who ended up designing wedding dresses.
Yes. Talk about a career shift. But it was something she was so passionate about, and she took that leap.
It just goes to show that purpose can be found in the most unexpected places.
Totally. And it's never too late to change direction. Like Todd, remember, switching his major from law to physical education.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
He's like the poster child for purpose-driven courage. He went against his parents' wishes, and he found a career where he could really make a difference.
Right, so it's about finding that sweet spot where your passions meet the needs of the world.
Exactly. And Robbins tells this beautiful story about Shirley, who started walking again after losing her husband. It started as a way to take care of herself.
Right.
But it ended up connecting her with her community, rekindling her love of nature, and ultimately giving her a renewed sense of purpose.
Wow. That's amazing. It's like even in the face of grief, we can still find ways to contribute and connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us to another key theme Robbins explores: gratitude.
Okay, how does gratitude tie into all of this?
Well, she says that when we focus on what we're grateful for, it shifts our whole perspective.
In what way?
From scarcity to abundance, from fear to possibility.
I see.
It's like those feelings of gratitude can actually fuel our courage and our sense of purpose.
Right, because when you appreciate what you have, even when things are tough, it makes you want to give back, to make things better.
Exactly. Robbins encourages us to practice gratitude every day, to reflect on the good things, to express appreciation to the people in our lives.
Simple but powerful.
Right. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the 5-second rule, I'm struck by how much ground it covers.
Me too. It's more than just a self-help book. It's like a blueprint for living a more courageous and fulfilling life.
Robbins gives us all these amazing tools and techniques.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it comes down to us, our willingness to actually put those tools into practice. It's about making those small choices day after day to embrace challenges and keep moving forward.
Even when it feels scary.
Exactly. So remember, you have the power to change your life. And it all starts with a single step.
A single act of courage.
And sometimes that act of courage can be as simple as counting down from 5 and taking action.
What will your 5-second rule moment be? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Mel Robbins' The 5-Second Rule.
We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we have. Until next time, keep pushing those boundaries, chase those dreams, and never underestimate the power of your own everyday